The situation in Yemen is very bad. They had a ceasefire in place since April. It just expired a few hours ago, and it was not renewed. Okay, and I'm gonna read to you just a bit briefly from this ABC piece. And mind you, there's a bit of propaganda, but don't worry, I'll always debunk it. So they say here that Yemen's warring sides have failed to reach an agreement to extend a nationwide ceasefire, the UN said on Sunday. Okay, so the UN's envoy to Yemen called on all sides to refrain from acts of provocation as the talks continue after the deadline of October 2nd for extending the agreement was missed. I love this garbage sentence here. Look at this. They say, quote, "The devastating conflict began in 2014 when the Iranian-backed Houthis seized the capital of Sana'a and much of northern Yemen and forced the government into exile." If you read that sentence and you have no clue where Yemen is, who the Houthis are, you have no idea about this situation, you would be under the impression that Iran sent a bunch of rebels into Yemen to kick the government out and take control and turn it into a puppet state. Like that's what you would understand from this garbage. This is such garbage. I don't even like necessarily using the term Houthis. You know why? Because they make it sound like it's a faction or something. It's the Yemenis, okay? Let me pull up a map. Let's look at who controls what in Yemen, okay? And you will understand what I'm trying to tell you. My point is that the vast majority of people in Yemen live in territories that are Houthi controlled, as they say. Okay? Yeah, you know why? Because that's who they're comfortable with. Okay, so let me pull this up. How old is this map, by the way? 2019. It's a bit old. Forgive me. I just pulled up the first one on Google, but the point still stands. I mean, look at the major port, Hodeidah. This is the major Red Sea port. It's the biggest port in Yemen. People live nearby in the capital in Sana'a. So the rest of the territories which are controlled by the Hadi government, meaning Saudi Arabia and their coalition, or Al Qaeda, people don't live there and never did. They live here. And that's the government that they have and they like and they want and support. Okay? So, the problem is that the Saudis are backed by the Americans, right? Whether it's Obama, whether it's Trump, they have all sold the Saudis so many weapons, so many. I mean, we're talking $300 billion under Trump, $115 billion under Obama. They want the money, right? Because the United States government is run by crooks who make a living from murdering people on the other side of the planet. So they have no problem giving the Saudis cluster bombs, giving them whatever they need, and they know that this weaponry is being used in Yemen. The other reason is not only because the Saudis are lovely clients of theirs. The other reason is that Yemen is part of the resistance, right? And the United States, Israel, Saudi Arabia, they already hate Syria. They hate Iran. They hate the Hashd al-Sha'bi. They hate the Palestinian and Lebanese resistance. And now Yemen has been added to that. Okay? And Yemen has support from the resistance, is part of the resistance, the axis of resistance. So there are many reasons why they've been trying to attack Yemen. One of the other reasons, which is very important, the resources. It's really sad that Yemen has to rely so much on the outside for food and so on, because they've broken it to that point. The thing is, though, the government in Yemen today issued a warning saying that if you are a Westerner or you're a foreigner and you work for a foreign gas company or oil company in Yemen, you need to leave. Go away. Because, your life could be in danger. And they're not saying that because they want to threaten anybody. They're saying that because their natural resources are being plundered and stolen. Okay? So one of the other main issues is that when we talk about the Hadi government, the internationally recognized government, they haven't done anything for people in Yemen. Not only are they working hand in glove with the Saudis to butcher the rest of the population, but they moved, for example, the central bank, they moved it away from Sana'a, okay, from the capital, because they said, we're the legitimate government, so we get to decide where the central bank is. Okay. And you know what they did afterwards? They stopped paying people who work in the government. So public servants, government employees, they haven't paid them in years. So let me get this straight. They want to take the money from the oil and the gas sales. They want to take the central bank. They claim to be the legitimate government, but don't want to pay anyone working for the government their salary? How does that work? So they're legitimate when it suits them, and they're internationally recognized when it suits them, and when it comes time to actually give people their money, they won't do it. That tells you everything you need to know. And let's go back to the piece, because they touch on some of these things briefly, but they don't tell you everything, and that's the problem. So here's the ABC article. They say in the hours leading up to the deadline, a Houthi military spokesman threatened international oil companies still working in the country to leave, or their facilities would be seized, saying that the fossil fuels belong to the people of Yemen and could be used to pay public servants' salaries. So, okay, a couple of points there. Let me get this straight. I can give you the Russians as an example. In Austria, they came up with an excuse to seize facilities that belong to Gazprom, which is the Russian state gas company. They said that according to this new law, you have to stock the gas reserves to at least 10%, otherwise the government can seize it. And they did this arbitrarily just so they could take it away from the Russians. And fine, they made up this rule, they made up this law, and they applied it. Okay, so that's Austria. Let's look at the EU. The EU said no more Russian gas or oil, and that's it. Fait accompli. My point here is that you have the EU, you have Austria, you have European countries, Western countries who make it very clear: you play by our rules or you get out of the country, or we will take your stuff. And when the Yemenis do it, when the Yemenis say you stop stealing our resources and get out, or we seize your facilities, that's a threat. It's not a threat. It's the law. It's their right. That's their right. It's not a threat. When you go to someone's country and steal their shit, you're the threat. So this wording is so disgusting, honestly. It's so disgusting. And they try to frame it like the Houthis are being violent or something. Complete rubbish. And look at this. This is very important, that they are going to use the fossil fuels to pay public servant salaries. That goes back to what I said before, how the Hadi government, the Saudi-backed government, is refusing to pay its own government employees and pay public servants. Fine. So they're going to find another way to do it, right? That's when you're not delivering. In the article, they say that April's truce had originally established a partial opening of the Sana'a airport. So again, Sana'a is the capital, and the Red Sea port of Hodeidah. The ensuing months have seen flights start again from the capital's airport to Jordan and Egypt. That makes me happy, right? I mean, when I see things like that, when Jordan is reopening flights with Damascus and Yemen with Erdogan, that makes me very happy. The problem here, though, is that they lied. The Saudi coalition, they broke the truce many, many, many times. They did not fully open Sana'a airport, which was a condition of the truce. They lied. Another condition of the truce was Hodeidah, the port, which is the biggest port in Yemen. And I published an investigation on this. Let me pull it up for you if you would like to read it. And I really think you should, so you understand how severe and serious the economic situation is in Yemen, and why the Saudi siege is just as deadly as the bombs. What's been happening for the last couple of years is that the Saudis have been diverting fuel ships away from the biggest port in Yemen, right? So you'll have somebody trying to bring fuel into the country, into Yemen, and they go to Hodeidah because it's the biggest port and it's close to the capital. It makes complete sense that you go there. And the Saudi-led coalition, they would take these fuel ships and divert them away and keep them for a year sometimes. A year. And if you are you're using this ship, which usually doesn't belong to the people on board, right? They're borrowing it, loaning it. If you fail to deliver the cargo and give the ship back so it can be used by someone else or for another purpose, you have to pay a fine. It's called a demurrage cost. Okay, that's just what they call it in shipping language, right? In maritime trade. It's called a demurrage fine, a demurrage cost. And my point here is that these fuel ships, they are kept so long. There's so many months, so many, even, like I said, in some cases over a year, just being held without reason. The demurrage costs become astronomical. So by the time the ship is finally released and allowed to actually go to Yemen, the fines make up the bulk of the cost that people are paying at the pump. Do you understand? It doesn't have to be this expensive. They are making it expensive. And the other thing is that even after releasing it, you think they let it go to Hudaida? No! They make the ships go to another port that is controlled by the Saudi coalition, which is further away. So what does that increase? Transportation, because now you got to drive the fuel all the way to Sana'a. And guess what? Who's on the road? Al-Qaeda. You have highway robbers who set up random checkpoints and make you pay a fine. Oh, this is our turf. Pay us or we'll shoot you. So now you have demurrage costs, transportation costs, and highway robbery that all have to be added to the fuel cost at the pump. So people in Yemen are being screwed. And it's not just about filling up the tanks. Everything needs fuel. You want to have electricity? You need fuel. Right? A lot of people have generators. They need fuel to power their homes because the public infrastructure, guess what? It ain't there because of the Hadi government and the Saudi strikes and the siege. Everything, man, from hospitals to clinics to pharmacies to manufacturing, every sector needs fuel. And when you don't have that, guess what happens? The prices go up, you have inflation, and it creates an even worse situation. So they are screwing this country left and right. And they even during this truce, they lied. They said we're going to allow ships to go to Hudaida, which they should have been doing anyway because the United Nations gives them certificates to dock, and the Saudi coalition violates and disregards these certificates from the UN and takes the ships anyway. But the Saudis said, okay, so from April until now, until October 2nd, we won't block the ships from going to Hudaida. And they did. They violated the truce. They refused to let ships dock in Hudaida, some of them. They refused to fully reopen Sana'a. And this is not even, I haven't even talked about the attacks, the actual violent attacks which violate the ceasefire. So there's so many issues here. It's really bad. It's really bad. I just want to bring up the article that I wrote. It's called Silent Killer. I published it actually, funnily enough, literally 2 days before the truce came into effect. And the truce proved my report correct because the fact the Saudis came out and said, you know what, we will let you dock your ships in Hudaida, proves that they were holding these ships hostage on purpose, that this was real, the siege was real, and they were doing it intentionally. So I wrote this article. It's called Silent Killer, The Siege of Yemen, and I published it March 31st. I wrote this with Amir, who's, you can see down here the description. So he graduated from Oxford. He worked at the World Bank as an economist. He's from Yemen and based in Yemen. And we wrote this report together with data coming from the UN, from IMF. And he used those sources on purpose so no one could come out and say, oh, it's biased. Obviously the IMF is biased and so on. But he used them specifically so because even in the quote unquote best case scenario with these figures, you can see how they're screwing Yemen. And this was a condition of the truce which they violated. And one of the ships, which I actually showed in the article, I put its location on the map because ships have trackers online, so you can see where they are currently. You could see that Jizan, which is where they were holding these ships, and this ship was, you can see headed to Hudaida, and it's called the Splendor Sapphire. So it was for months still being docked. And guess what happened? After the truce came into effect, 2 days after I published this article, the ship was finally let go. And it docked in Hudaida. Once again, it shows you they're doing this on purpose to destroy Yemen's economy. They're holding these ships hostage for no reason. And you can see the UN certificate I published here. This is a certificate of clearance. They're issued to every ship, right? And even though they have them, the Saudi coalition don't give a crap, and they hold them hostage anyway. So, just going back to this ABC piece, yeah, Grundberg, he's the UN envoy. He's the special envoy for Yemen, right? He has very bright blonde hair. You'll recognize him instantly. But he was speaking about this, how it's a shame that they cannot extend the deadline for the ceasefire. And yeah, it is a shame. But what I want to say is that even when the ceasefire was in effect, they did not respect it. They violated it. And they are making people's lives hell in Yemen. And Yemen is, again, another area of the world which is forgotten. No one cares about their human rights. No one flies any Yemeni flags for them. You won't see any landmarks lit up with Yemeni flags. to support them. What do these Western countries do? They kill Yemenis. They sell weapons to Saudi Arabia, and they know what's going to be, what they're going to use these weapons for, and what they're going to do with these weapons. And another problem with the Ukraine war is that Yemen gets a lot of its wheat. I think it was from both Russia and Ukraine. Yeah, from both Russia and Ukraine. You can imagine this war has made Yemen's situation even worse, even during this ceasefire, because the wheat supply was decimated globally, but especially for them, they have nothing. They have nothing. No fuel, no electricity, no medicine, no hospitals, and on top of that, it's heartbreaking. It's I don't know what to say. There's a phrase from the Yemeni government. They said, I'm paraphrasing here, but they said that anything that happens after tonight, when as the ceasefire expires, no matter what it is, it's the fault of the coalition, the Saudi coalition, and they're right. Yemenis, 80% of Yemenis who live in the Houthi-controlled areas did not declare war on themselves. That was Saudi Arabia, it was the UAE, and the Hadi government, and they're making people's lives hell.